In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro proposed to Guyana meeting with Caricom to discuss the dispute over the Essequibo. Argentina holds regional elections this Sunday. 1.5 million voters will renew the authorities of the province of Mendoza. And in Brazil, 13 municipalities remain in an emergency situation due to the extreme drought affecting the nation. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro proposed to his Guyanese counterpart Mohamed Irfan Ali to hold a meeting with the Caribbean community, Caricom, in order to resume dialogue to resolve the territorial dispute over Guyana Essequibo. The Venezuelan president asked Irfan Ali to cease his irresponsibility, manipulation, double standards, hypocrisy, and false victimization, while warning him that in his eagerness to please the transnational interests, he is turning Guyana into a branch of ExxonMobil. President Maduro asked his Guyanese counterpart not to allow the United States Southern Command to turn his country into a military base against Venezuela and urged him to adhere to the 1966 Geneva Agreement to solve the territorial controversy over eastern Guyana. Maduro warned that the conduct of the government of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana violates international legality and jeopardizes peace in the region. And the Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez also rejected recent statements by the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, rejecting the call made by the Venezuelan National Assembly for a consultative referendum to defend the rights of the Bolivarian Republic over the Essequibo territory. Through social media X, the Venezuelan Vice President wrote, "Almagro, Venezuela has always defeated you and will continue to do so. You are a shameful stain on our region. You have been a participant in coups d'etat, economic wars, and prolific corruption. Godfather of regional extremism and the perverse mind of lawfare. Venezuela will carry out its referendum for the defense of its rights over the Essequibo territory in accordance with the nation's constitution and international law. Nothing will stop it, and your plans of aggression against Venezuela directed by ExxonMobil will be defeated. Venezuela will always win." And the government of Venezuela rejected the statement of the Secretariat of the Caribbean Community that seeks to manipulate the reality of the arguments presented by the Venezuelan state in fair and necessary defense of its security and territorial integrity. The document pointed out that, in this way, an attempt is being made to mislead public opinion by echoing the false claims created by the Cooperative Republic of Guyana to the detriment of the prestige of Caricom. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela denounces that the U.S. company ExxonMobil has co-opted the ruling elite of Guyana in order to plunder natural resources of the region and is responsible for the emerging unrest in the Caribbean by exacerbating the differences between states over undemarcated territories. Finally, the text states the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, adhering to the mutual respect and dialogue that characterizes the region, expresses its full willingness to participate in a high-level meeting promoted by Caricom with the participation of the heads of states and foreign ministers of both Venezuela and Guyana. On Saturday, the 70th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations focused on multilateralism and climate change. During this fifth day, the heads of state urged attention to the global temperature increase, as well as to reject the use of coercive measures as a tool to settle conflicts between nations. The heads of state also emphasized the need to restructure the world economy to favor historically marginalized sectors. The heads of government rejected the inclusion of Cuba in the list of countries that support terrorism at a time when they urged the United States to put an end to its oppressive measures against Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. During his speech at the 70th session of the General Assembly, Venezuela's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ivan Gil, criticized the United Nations for, in his words, not fulfilling its foundational purposes and said that the solution to the new complex challenges facing humanity today could not be achieved without consolidating inclusive multilateralism.
The United Nations has not fulfilled its foundational purpose, and we now face even more serious challenges. The The United Nations has not managed to overcome the unilateralism of countries that, by reproducing colonial and imperial logics, seek to assert themselves above the principles enshrined in this organization's founding charter. The solution to the new and complex challenges facing humanity today cannot be achieved without consolidating inclusive multilateralism.
Addressing the hate speech and persecution against democratic processes and the restriction of freedom of expression, the Venezuelan Foreign Affairs Minister also denounced the political targeting of journalist Julian Assange and the persecution against the Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab.
With double standards, those who claim to defend freedoms become persecutors. Those who claim to defend democracy activate mechanisms of political persecution to reverse democratic processes or to restrict freedom of expression, as in the case of Julian Assange, who remains a political target of those who cannot forgive him for revealing the true nature of imperialist interventionism. We also reject the persecution of diplomats, a clear violation of the Vienna Convention, as in the case of our diplomat Alex Saab, who was illegally kidnapped by the government of the United States of America. We demand his immediate release.
The Venezuelan Foreign Minister noted that without unilateral course of measures, Venezuela could be part of the solution of the ongoing crisis, mostly concerning food security and energy.
In renewing our firm commitment to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, we insist on the need to ensure adequate funding for the Loss and Damage Fund, always bearing in mind the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities and equity. We know that the resources exist, where they are, and who has them. As Comandante Chavez said 14 years ago, let's not change the climate, let's change the system. President, in the face of the economic and financial crisis that particularly affects developing countries, we need a new model for the mechanisms of global governance, where the Global South has fair access to international financing. Until there is a true and effective reform of the multilateral system in the financial sphere, the Sustainable Development Goals, the subject of this meeting, are destined to be unfulfilled.
In his speech at the United Nations General Assembly, Burkina Faso's Minister of State, Bassol Mabasie, said international relations were tainted by what he called a great diplomacy without ethics, morals, and dignity, and criticized the fact that leaders representing the people of Niger were not allowed access to the UN headquarters.
International relations are tainted by great diplomacy with no conscience or morals, dignity or integrity, justice nor peace. And this is proven because there is a clear hunger for devouring prey. Today, we unfortunately must see that, contrary to the good faith statements made at this UN podium, which call for respect for the UN Charter and international law, leaders representing the people of Niger, this brotherly people, were essentially forbidden from accessing the UN headquarters. Burkina Faso strongly condemns this underhanded maneuver, which seems to belong to the practices of the past. And this can only be explained by a loss of essential values needed for any harmonious life in society. The UN should never be used as an instrument in the hands of any country.
On the other hand, Armenia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ararat Mirzoyan, expressed his concern about what he considered the erosion of multilateralism in the world and blamed neighboring Azerbaijan for the present conflict in the region.
The devastating developments of the past years, which disrupted the security architecture in the world and especially in Europe, have significantly damaged multilateralism. If a couple of years ago we were contemplating the decline of multilateralism, today we see erosion of that very tenet and its foundations, such as international law, human rights, and cooperative security.
Let's take our first short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you can find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back from the south. In Argentina, close to 1.5 million citizens will vote this Sunday in Mendoza to elect the vice governor, provincial deputies, and senators. At 8 a.m. local time, the people of Mendoza began to exercise their right to vote to elect the new provincial leader, even though the rain delayed their arrival. Therefore, it is expected that the coalitions in dispute will closely follow the polls, which will be published later in the evening. In these elections, in addition to governor and vice governor, 19 seats in the Senate and 24 provincial deputies are elected, representing the 4 electoral sections in which Mendoza is divided. In Brazil, the Workers' Party is backing a constitutional amendment that will change the way the government regulates quotas for women political candidates. Our correspondent Brian Meir has more.
97 years after women gained the right to vote in Brazil, only 17% of federal lawmakers are women. In 2009, a law was passed requiring political parties to earmark campaign funds for women candidates, but since then enforcement efforts have prioritized fines over compliance, and most political parties have been ignoring both.
Parties aren't compliant with a law requiring 30% of their campaign funds to go to women candidates. This weakens our candidacies because if the parties know they won't be penalized, they don't feel obligated to obey the law.
Opposition parties are pushing an amendment through Congress to grant amnesty for quota law violation fines. Realizing that with only 24% of Congress, the PT and its allies are too small to defeat it, they have successfully inserted language into the bill so that it won't alter the campaign fund requirement for women and will force all parties to elect a minimum of 20% women candidates to state and national Congress.
Along with establishing a number of congressional seats for women, there is a political penalty. If a party doesn't reach the 20% quota, it'll be required to substitute elected men with the women from their party who received the most votes until they reach that 20%.
Brian Meir, teleSUR, Recife.
In the United States, authorities report the highest monthly number of migrants apprehended so far this year. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection in August 2023, almost 233,000 irregular migrants were apprehended along the border with Mexico. Authorities say the figure represents an increase of up to 27% compared to July, when detentions were a little over 183,000. Federal officials say they expect further fluctuations in the number of detentions made in view of a new increase in migrations to the United States. The head of European diplomacy, Joseph Borrell, said the issue of immigration is weakening the unity of the bloc and could lead to its dissolution. According to Borrell, the bloc's unity could be challenged by disagreements on immigration policy, as some member states are refusing to accept people from other regions. Borrell said some countries will not allow the entry of people from other nationalities in order to maintain their purity. Borrell warned, however, that given the low growth of the European population, they will have to accept a greater number of migrants to guarantee the survival of the bloc's workforce. Migration policy is a controversial issue for the European Union due to the increase of refugees pushed by conflicts mainly caused by the West. In the United Kingdom, citizens demonstrated for Britain to rejoin the European Union. This Saturday, the National March for Reinstatement marched through the city of Parliament to Parliament Square. The march highlighted the support for the return to the membership of the European Union. The founding leader of the movement, Peter Court, mentioned that the working class is paying for the consequence of the withdrawal of the multilateral organization, to which the parliamentarian Keir Rodney Starmer responded by ratifying the British government's refusal to return to the regional bloc. The Russian armed forces destroyed stockpiles of Ukrainian cruise missiles and depleted uranium projectiles after 12 attacks against Ukrainian military targets. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the Russian Army's targets focused on aircraft and armored vehicle repair facilities, as well as ammunition, precision, and foreign-made weapons warehouses. According to the Defense Ministry, they also targeted intelligence and training centers for Ukrainian saboteurs. As a result, of the attacks, the capabilities of the Kiev forces operating in the directions of Kherson and Zaporizhia were weakened. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the armed forces of the Eurasian country use high-precision and long-range air and ground-based weapons and drones to carry out the attacks. We have our second and final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join us on YouTube at teleSUR English, where you can rewatch our programming and special interviews. Click on the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, we'll be right back. Welcome back from the south. In Somalia, authorities registered at least 18 dead and 40 wounded after an attack by a vehicle loaded with explosive. The vehicle was detonated at a checkpoint in the city of Beledweyne in central Somalia. Citizens declared that after the explosion, shots were heard in the area. The explosion burned fossil fuel stations and stores along the roadside. The city of Beledweyne is described as the second city where most terrorist attacks are recorded after Mogadishu, the capital. The Palestinian government accused the Israeli authorities of inciting hatred in the context of the speech made by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations headquarters. In a statement issued by the foreign minister, the Palestinian authorities expressed their rejection of Netanyahu's remarks, who, according to the document from the United Nations podium, confirmed once again the colonial designs of his government and the objective of the illegal occupation after Netanyahu defended the actions of his executive and presented a map of Israel that occupies all the territory of historic Palestine, including the areas of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. The foreign ministry criticized the forcibly and violent annexation of the Palestinian homeland and called on the international community to firmly reject and condemn the attacks against the Palestinian people. And 13 municipalities in Brazil remain in emergency due to the extreme drought affecting this nation. Temperatures have exceeded 41 degrees Celsius in some cities. The National Institute of Investigations of the Amazon report that the drought is due to two simultaneous climatic phenomena, which are the phenomenon of El Niño and the warming of the tropical North Atlantic. In addition to the municipalities in emergency, another 16 are under alert due to the multiple effects. The drop in the level of waterways has caused water supply problems in some localities, while the city of Sao Paulo has reached record temperatures during the last 48 hours. In Colombia, more than 500 hectares of bushes and pastures have been consumed by forest fires, affecting the municipality of Yaguara, Huila, for 5 days. According to Huila Disaster Risk Management Office, some families have been evacuated from their homes due to high temperatures and ahead of a possible spread of the flames. Other sectors such as Santa Elena and Loma La Venturosa have had some 200 hectares of bushes and grass burned. Firefighters officials have confirmed they have managed to control several fire outbreaks in the mountain area, for which they had the support of Colombian Air Force, who use helicopters to prevent the wildfires from spreading to populated areas. In the United States, tropical storm Ophelia made landfall with hurricane force winds of almost 68 miles per hour. Early on Saturday morning, the National Hurricane Center reported heavy rains in Raleigh, a town in the state of North Carolina. The meteorological agency expects the storm to weaken in its path. The emergency service says several residential areas and businesses across the state have been left without power, and they have predicted possible flooding in southeastern Virginia, which is being hit by the eastern side of the storm. Government officials have declared a state of emergency with orders to call off any event during the entire weekend. In Italy, forest fires in the north of Sicily left at least 2 people dead. According to local authorities, at the moment there are more than 40 fires fueled by high temperatures and strong winds that hit the Mediterranean. As a consequence of this, several people, among them 700 tourists, had to be evacuated from the hotel where they were staying. The Italian Civil Defense Agency decreed a red alert in the west of the city of Palermo, where several residents also had to abandon their homes. The fire departments continue to work to extinguish the flames. Like this, we have come to the end of this news briefing, and you can find this and many other news on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social medias on Facebook, Instagram, X, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.